Tally, what do you think about the dungeons that were revealed? Thank you. Let's go and have a look at that. Yeah, let's have a look at the dungeons that have been revealed for Dragonflight. So these were data mined. I believe the first person who announced them was Mr. GM. Mr. GM is like my favorite YouTube creator, my favorite WoW creator at the moment. The thing I love about Mr. GM is that I love his Twitter. My favorite thing about Mr. GM is his Twitter. Because what Mr. GM does on Twitter now, every day he'll do like 3 tweets, which are just like, I think there should be more customizations in Dragonflight. I think there should be a special bag just for profession stuff in Dragonflight. 1,000 likes. And that's his tweeting style now. He's just like, I think there should be another choice of Drake in Dragonflight. Yes. Bravo that man. Bravo, that man. Yes. Amazing, excellent, brilliant. And like, I love it. I love it. That's like what all his tweets are like these days, and I adore it, and I love it. Anyway, I think it was him that discovered initially discovered the dungeons. So here we go. Here are the dungeons that are available now. The way that Dragonflight is doing Mythic Plus dungeons is something which is really, really interesting. It's not an ideal fix, but it is a fix for a problem that I think that World of Warcraft, and in particular Mythic Plus, has had ever since Legion, frankly. And this problem gets worse and worse every expansion. BFA was probably when it started becoming a real problem, and it has remained a problem ever since. I think Shadowlands actually, I say it's got worse and worse. I think Shadowlands has actually done some interesting things to curb the problems, honestly. I think it was at its worst in BFA. And that problem is that you get 8 dungeons in an expansion. Later on, 9. With the mega dungeon, which is essentially 10, right? And that's awesome, that's great. It'd be nice if we got more dungeons, to be honest. Obviously, the more dungeons, the better. But, you know, we've established now, essentially, that there are 8 dungeons at the beginning of an expansion. And that means there are 8 dungeons in Mythic Plus. And that means there are 8 loot tables, you know, on those dungeons. And in the first season, that's awesome. You get all your Abyss loot. You're like, yeah, got all my loot from season 1. Brilliant. And then season 2 starts. Oh, yeah, and, you know, you supplement that with raid loot and what have you. And then season 2 starts, and there's a new raid with a whole new loot table, and you're like, whoa, look at all this new raid loot that I can get. This is fantastic. And then you look at Mythic Plus, and it's the exact same loot tables that you had in season 1, because it's the exact same dungeons. Now, the item level has gone up to match the season, so you've got this thing where if you are Mythic Plussing, and the gear that you need for Mythic Plus, and most people have at least a couple of Abyss items in Mythic Plus, like beyond raiding, and lots of people only play Mythic Plus to gear, so, you know, is what it is. What that means is you are not just re-gearing, because re-gearing is one of the fun parts about an MMO. It's one of the fun parts about World of Warcraft is, you know, new tiers of content come out with better gear, and you want to get that gear. That's a fundamental part of WoW. The problem with Mythic Plus gearing is you're not getting new gear, are you, every season? The season starts, and you're going back into the same Mythic Plus dungeons to get the same gear. Grinding out higher item level gear every season is great. Grinding out the same gear at a higher item level fucking sucks. It absolutely blows. To the extent, this is how bad it was, in BFA, where you actually had people saying, people hated it so much that you actually had people saying, it sucks that you have to grind new gear every season. You know how like the WoW community often recognizes a problem but only half recognize it and really kind of like ends up completely misdiagnosing it? Like the WoW community is like the shittiest doctor ever born, because they know something's bad and wrong, but the amount of misdiagnosis that goes on in the WoW community is off the fucking charts. So there is like too much RNG in the acquisition of one type of gear, and the WoW community goes, RNG fucking sucks, man. RNG, like, you put RNG in a game and that game sucks. The only way to have a good video game is no RNG. If we want to save WoW, get rid of RNG. I don't want to see it. If it's random, fuck it, get it out of my fucking game. And it's like, no, that's a misdiagnosis right there. That's like amputating someone's leg because they've got an ingrowing toenail. That's the diagnosis that you've given that. And you know, likewise, with a whole ton of other stuff as well. And yeah, you need a bit of RNG. And likewise, like, people were so pissed off having to, like, it felt so bad re-grinding, reacquiring, or what was the other one? Corruption was another good one. Corruption was a great one. Because, again, complete misdiagnosis as to what the problem with corruption gear was. There was no problem with corruption gear. Like, the effects on corruption gear in 8.3 was absolutely fine. The ideas behind it were great. It was the acquisition of corruption gear that sucked so hard. Like, acquiring corruption gear sucked. That was the part of the system that was broken. Corruption gear itself was stupid and fun. Nothing wrong with it at all. The problem with corruption gear was the acquisition. So again, a complete misdiagnosis by the WoW community on that one. And yeah, the same thing happened in BFA, where people were, you know, rightly, correctly bored with, and it felt incredibly bad to get the same gear again every season at higher item level. And it wasn't, one of the reasons it felt so bad was it wasn't just Mythic Plus, it was essentially Raid as well, because with Azerite armor, you know, yeah, the Azerite armor in the new Raid was different, but you were trying to get the one with the same BIS, like, Azerite traits on it as the one you got in the previous tier. So it didn't feel like new gear in the raids either. So, like, every season in BFA felt like, whether you were playing Mythic Plus or Raid, you were trying to get the same gear again at higher item levels. And that led to a massive misdiagnosis by the WoW community, where they were like, look, like, lots of prominent people in the community were saying genuine bullshit. Like, look, the problem is that, you know, it's the season system, right? Where, you know, multiple points throughout an expansion, a whole new bunch of gear is released, which is higher item level than the gear you got before. Which means, you know, at various points throughout each expansion, all the gear you got is now useless. Because modern WoW is shit. And it's like, no. That's a good thing about WoW. Like, new tiers of gear coming out with more powerful gear to get, that's a good thing. That's a fun thing. That's a fundamental touchstone and cornerstone of the way WoW is built. The problem was that you were trying to get the same gear every season, and that sucked. Now, there's a very, very obvious, like, way to solve this problem, which is something that I've been saying since BFA, and it's obviously far too much work, but the most obvious way of changing it is to change, if you're not going to change the dungeons, right? The best thing to do would be to make 8 new dungeons every season with different loot tables. But on the assumption that you can't do that, just change the loot tables every season. Those of you that have been watching this stream know that I've been advocating for this since BFA. I consider it, after patch cadence, I consider it the biggest problem in WoW is grinding the same gear out in Mythic Plus every season. Like, I literally consider it the second biggest problem that WoW has. The biggest problem is its patch cadence, but I consider this like problem number 2 in terms of importance. I think it's that important. And because it's so important, I genuinely would think about, if I was Ian Hazakostas, putting the manpower on changing the gear every, like, the loot tables every season. I would genuinely consider doing that. Because it's such a big problem, I think it's worth, you know, allocating the resources to doing it. So there's that. Now, what WoW have done instead is probably the next best thing. Instead of having all 8 dungeons form the entirety of the Mythic Plus season for season 1 of Dragonflight, what they've chosen to do is they've chosen 4 dungeons, which I'm assuming are the leveling dungeons, 1 from each zone, which will be in the rotation for season 1, and 4 time walking dungeons. And that will be season 1. And then in season 2, it will be the other 4 Dragonflight dungeons and another 4 time walking dungeons. So the loot table for Mythic Plus in season 1 and 2 of Dragonflight will be completely different. Okay, it's half and half leveling, half and half level 70 stuff. Okay, good. Yeah. So that's the thing. It is a solving of the problem. It solves the problem. The loot tables will be different between season 1 and season 2. What they're going to do for season 3, I'm guessing they'll probably just go to the 8 Dragonflight dungeons. Or maybe there'll be a mega dungeon out by then, which can like spice it up a little bit as well. It solves the problem, and I consider it the second biggest problem in WoW, so that's pretty good. How eloquent a solve is it? Well, let's have a look at the dungeons. We've got Ruby Life Pools, banging dungeon. Nice and short, people will like that. Algathar Academy, which I have not yet played, but I guess I can now that there are level 70 characters, right? Maybe we can get on there and do that. Nokrahund Offensive, which is an absolute fucking banger of a dungeon. That's the one where you fly around the entirety of the Onaran Plains zone. Very, very fucking cool. Going to be incredibly fun to watch on like esports as well. Azure Vault, which is another one I haven't played yet, actually. Court of Stars, which, you know, it's a vintage. It's certainly a vintage. It's a vintage which I think definitely splits opinion. So Court of Stars, the reason that's worth talking about, obviously, is because it's got a lot of scripted stuff in it. It's a very, very scripted dungeon. What with the intro and like that whole part of the dungeon where you are triggering events that make certain kind of mini bosses come to you. But of course, the most famous part of it is the Cluedo bit. And it's really a dungeon that, more than probably any other dungeon in WoW history, separates out those who use add-ons and those who don't. And that's why Mythic Plus pushers love Court, because they go in with add-ons, which means they just click on a bunch of NPCs and their add-on tells them who the NPC is that they need to click on. That's what the majority of high level players will have. Now, does that completely bypass the entire point of the mechanic? Yes. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Bypasses it completely. Now, is that a good thing? I know, whatever. There is no add-on to skip this event. Yeah, there is. Yeah, there absolutely is. Not to skip it, obviously you still have to click on stuff and get the clues, but the add-on keeps track of the clues and tells you who the NPC is eventually once you've got all the clues that you need. Yeah, absolutely. No. There's one that, like, if all I had to do to win the game of Cluedo was like enter all the cards into a machine, and then the machine gave me a card telling me who did it, am I playing Cluedo? No, obviously not. The NPCs are always standing in the same place. The add-on doesn't help you. Really? The add-on doesn't help you. How many downloads does the add-on have? The add-on doesn't help you to complete the Court of Stars. So all the people that have the add-on installed and who can't do the game in Court of Stars, that must be like psychosomatic, right? That must be like, it must be a placebo, you know? They only think they can't do it without the add-on, right? Really, the add-on doesn't help them at all. If only they fucking knew. If only they knew. They just they've been riding a bike with stabilizers all the time, but they didn't even need to. And then one day their dad takes the stabilizers off without telling them, and they're cycling, and they don't even know they haven't got the stabilizers on. And then their dad says, hey, I took your stabilizers off, and they instantly fall down and go, I can't ride without stabilizers. No, the add-on helps. Definitely. And takes like the actual thought out of the entire system. It takes the actual thought out of everything in that minigame. Like, I'm not going to debate that. I'm sorry. Of course it does. Anyway, you try going in there without an add-on, it's a whole different kettle of fish. It's a really good fucking dungeon though. Absolutely awesome dungeon. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy going in there with pugs and wiping in the first big pull. Can you open the add-on page, please? No, because I'm not your fucking mum. I told you, I'm really sorry, Tirisha. I told you, I'm not going to discuss this. Obviously, the add-on makes it easier. Obviously. Like, I'm very sorry. It just clearly, obviously does. This isn't a discussion. Sorry. Yeah, but no, my favorite is, the big pull at the beginning when you go through, like when you've done the boat ride and you get through the couple of trash packs and then you go through the building and you come out into the courtyard for the first time and then you all instantly wipe. That's my favorite bit about Court of Stars. Yeah, that feeling when you jump over the first bridge, nobody pulls the guard and it's just like, oh shit, good work. So yeah, I mean, it'll be an interesting one for Mythic Plus, I guess, right? And the current meta, right? Okay, Halls of Valor is another one which I think is splitting the player base right now. I saw a lot of people when Halls of Valor was announced shitting blood, basically. It's a long one. It's a very, very long dungeon. And, it's got some very intense trash pulls in it as well. Can you put 1 in chat if you think Halls of Valor is a good idea, and 2 in chat if you think it's a fucking terrible idea? It's a mix, but I think the ones have it. Halls of Valor is the longest Mythic Plus dungeon ever. Wow, yeah, 45-minute timer, I think it was originally. It's great because you can't cheese the crap out of it. Yes, yeah. And it's a fucking slog, let's be real. It's a slog. Okay, good. I think people are generally more excited about it then. Okay, well, I have seen some people making their opinions very, very known. And their opinions were not... Okay, Shadow Moon Burial Grounds. Now, this has been... this has not been in Mythic Plus before, has it? Because it's not in the first ever WoD Mythic Plus dungeons now, is it? Am I right? It's never been a Mythic Plus dungeon before, has it? Shadow Moon Burial Grounds. And frankly, more of this kind of thing, It's all very well having 2 Legion Mythic Plus dungeons in this opening thing, but what the people really want is Mythic Plus dungeons that have from expansions that have never been Mythic Plus dungeons before, like Temple of the Jade Serpent. Congratulations. Well done. Wait a minute. I bet you there's a Mr. GM tweet on this. Wait, I bet you £1 million there's a Mr. GM tweet that says... They should do Classic and TBC Mythic Plus. Phew. £1 million saved. I'd love to see them make a Mythic Plus only version of some of the pre-mop dungeons. But he's right. The man's right, goddammit. It's just after his tweet where he went, I really like it when I got on a plane and it doesn't crash. Or like, I think all food should be food that keeps you alive and doesn't poison you. So yeah, no, but the boy's right. The boy is right. These are the things we want. We want Shadow Moon Burial Grounds. We want Temple of the Jade Serpent. Which one is Temple of the Jade Serpent? I find it... I never remember the different names of Mrs. Pandaria dungeons. Which one is Temple of the Jade Serpent? The one with the Shah? Oh, the Water Boss first dungeon. I thought it's the Tiger Temple one. Oh, okay. Wow, that's a good one. Dragon then Shah. I remember it. Yeah, so it's... Okay, so the Temple of the Tiger one has a Shah bit as well, doesn't it? The one with the story of the 2 sons. Yeah, okay. I remember it. There's like a little open courtyard bit with a dragon boss. There's the windy bit at the beginning with the 2 sons boss. And then there's a big Shah fight in the end as well, right? Yeah, I remember it. Okay, cool. Yeah, people are going to really enjoy that. And yeah, that's going to be very, very awesome. That's going to be really cool. Halls of Valor and Court of Stars, I find it very difficult to be so excited about because, we've all bopped those in Mythic Plus 100 times before. New ones, new dungeons that have not been Mythic Pluses are much more exciting. Here's the thing. Even Temple of the Jade Serpent and Shadow Moon Burial Grounds are not as exciting as a Dragonflight dungeon. And I can absolutely see the criticism that people are sharing and that people have, whereby a new expansion and half of the Mythic Plus rotation is old dungeons. I agree, that's not ideal. Is it better than having the same loot table 2 seasons in a row? Yes, it is better than that. So it does solve the problem. It's like I said at the beginning, it's not the best fix. The best fix would be to have either new Dragonflight dungeons every season, as in enough that you completely change the loot table, so that would be 8 new dungeons every season, or just changing the loot table every season. So, I mean, what they could do is they could have the 8 Dragonflight dungeons in Season 1, and then bring out 4 new Dragonflight dungeons in Season 2 with 4 time-walking dungeons then, because, it's not such a big deal having time-walking dungeons in the second patch. But I agree. That's obviously impossible. Like, we proved that's impossible. We're not going to get that many dungeons in expansion. We just have to accept that, whatever. I know that. So this seems like the best fix. I agree with the people who are a bit like, it just doesn't feel good to have old dungeons, in season 1 of a new expansion. I agree with that. It doesn't feel as good as having Dragonflight dungeons would, but I think it's worth it for the trade-off of having different loot. Completely 100% different loot tables in season 2. I think the trade-off is worth it because, it's not ideal, but it's better than the alternative, which I think is the second worst problem in WoW. I think they've missed a trick by not doing kata dungeons, though. So weird to me, giving so much importance to loot after playing Final Fantasy XIV for 8 years. Well, no. Okay. So I think most people who play Mythic Plus, they do it for, like in most MMO content, they do it for a combination of enjoyment of the content and the loot on top of that. And Mythic Plus content is really, really good. Mythic Plus is a really awesome way of playing the game, and it's exciting and it's fun, and it can be incredibly high level if you want it to be, and it's incredibly challenging. It's different challenges for different people. I think it's fantastic. Like I agree with Ian Hazacostas. It's one of the best single innovations in the history of the game. One of the loot tables being the same every season are something that spoils that enjoyment. So some people do Mythic Plus because they feel like they have to, but I don't think they're in the majority. Like loot is important in MMOs. Of course it is. Of course it is. Like loot is important in Final Fantasy XIV as well. It might weigh differently on the scale in importance, but it's absolutely something which is important in that game too. And the acquisition of gear is important in that gear too. The weightings are different on the scale. And that changes within the MMO for different players as well. That's certainly the case in Final Fantasy XIV. So the weightings are different, but, it's more, imagine you had a form of content that you really liked doing. And imagine that you did it all the time because you really liked it. You got all of the rewards for it pretty quickly, because you play it a lot. You got it in, say, 3 months. But you really love playing the content still, so you're still doing it, and you're just getting the same gear all over getting the same rewards still. You get to a point maybe about a year in or a year and a half in where you're like, I really like this content and I play it all the time. Can we swap up the rewards a little bit? I think it's more that. Like if you have a form of content that you really like doing and you're doing it all the time, you're gonna like it more for a change up in the rewards. No matter how much you enjoy the content, it's always nice to have more reason to play it as well. And okay, so gear, you're right. Gear plays a slightly different role in Final Fantasy and WoW as well, in that there is more gear that changes your play style in WoW. Well, okay, there is gear that changes your playstyle in varying ways in WoW, which isn't really something that exists in Final Fantasy XIV. They have different priorities as games, which is good. I like them both for their different priorities, and I'm glad they don't have the same priorities, because if they had the same priorities, I wouldn't have as much reason to play both games, and I like playing both games, so I like having that reason to. Mythic Plus gets better numbers than raiding. They need to start doing more for Mythic Plus. Well, I mean, if I was Ian Hazacostas, I would give serious thought to putting in the resources that means we can change the loot table every season, or certainly getting old dungeons into Mythic Plus that have never been in Mythic Plus before. I think that's the thing. I think when people are like, oh, it sucks having old dungeons in the first season of a new expansion, that is true. I agree with that. I agree with it much more for Court of Stars and Halls of Valor, which only came out like 6 years ago, and which, we were still playing in Mythic Plus 4 years ago, and have been Mythic Plus dungeons before. It's much easier to be excited about dungeons that have never been in Mythic Plus before. So I don't know why they wouldn't put some Cataclysm ones in there, and because some dragon-heavy Cataclysm dungeons would be pretty sweet. I just prefer they change the vault so it won't give you 3 of the same type of loot. I'm tired of getting 3 of my legendary neck in the vault. I think the vault's so good, though. The vault solves a lot of problems that BFA had and really refines a system which is in a good way. And I think the Creation Catalyst is a brilliant system as well. We still haven't seen how that is going to be represented in Dragonflight, but we've been told that it will. We've been told that it is represented in Dragonflight, but we just don't know how. It's going to take the form of professions in some way, we've been told. And that's one of the biggest questions I have for Dragonflight right now is, How is Creation Catalyst being represented in this expansion? And what are the details? How does it work? Is the vault still there in Dragonflight? Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen it, but I think it definitely will be. It is. Do we know where the vault is? Well, obviously in Valdrakken, but where? Where in Valdrakken is it? Oh, it is in the bank. Yeah, it wasn't in the bank in BFA. And it's kind of like, it wasn't in the bank in Legion, and it wasn't in the bank in BFA. And it's like next to the bank in Oribos. It's in the bank area, but it's not like in the bank. Like, it's a weird one because nothing is its own place in Oribos. There wasn't a vault in BFA. No, well, I mean, like, you know, where you went to pick up your chest. Anyway, I'm glad that they're giving some thought to solving this problem, which I rate one of the biggest problems in WoW. It's a shame that they have to go back to old dungeons to do it, but I think that's the best we can hope for. I would much rather see dungeons that have never been in Mythic Plus before than Halls of Valor. I can't get too excited about Halls of Valor and Court of Stars. Shadow Moon Burial Grounds and Temple of the Jade Serpent feel like as close to new dungeons as you can get because they're older and because they've never been Mythic Plus before. And I'd like to see a real focus on dungeons that haven't been in Mythic Plus before. I don't care what it takes. Put the manpower on it, Ian. Make it happen. It's important. The end.